WN. Around doing the Tony Robbins craziness and watching the Ravens in Kansas City. It is the first road game that I elected to miss that didn't involve my wife's cancer in the history of the franchise. So it was a big deal for me, and certainly finding ways to watch the game and talk about it and do post-game. Luke Jones has been at the Castle this week, and Wednesday was a momentous day, and certainly lots of podium talk, lots of John Harbaugh, lots of Lamar Jackson, lots of John Harbaugh. You're going to hear that here at WNST.net, as well as out in our buyatoyota.com audio vault. Luke, would have been kind of like not being there the day Ray Lewis stepped up and answered my question and announced his retirement, kind of, sort of. I don't know how it went down for Harbaugh and Flacco and Lamar behind closed doors and what all this means. Flacco sees the writing on the wall here. I think we all do. But I still think he's not thrown his last pass as a Raven. And press conference or no press conference, announcement or no announcement, we've seen Lamar Jackson get broken into a couple of times already. I don't think we've heard the end of Joe Flacco, but an interesting day to be in front of these human beings and hear them talk about this shift in the middle of December, much like the shift to Cam Cameron the year they won the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the next 3 weeks and maybe beyond that work out. And to your point, I think it would be premature to just completely write the retrospective farewell to Joe Flacco at this point, because Lamar Jackson is one sprained ankle, one torn ACL. I mean, look at the Washington Redskins, for example, what they went through by letting Kirk Cousins go, and then Alex Smith comes in and suffers what could be a career-ending, life-altering kind of injury, depending on how that plays out with him. So you never really know. But it's very clear, as you said, the writing has been on the wall to some degree since late April when the Ravens drafted Lamar Jackson. As I passionately debated with you the night that the Ravens made that decision, you don't draft a first-round quarterback without having intentions of him being the guy for you sooner rather than later. It's just the way it works. Now,
I don't think they would have thought the division would be on the line, because the division's on the line now all of a sudden, right? All of a sudden, we can get a home game in a couple of weeks if you can win these games, and because it feels like Pittsburgh is rolling toward the drain at this point, right?
Well, I think people are counting out the Steelers way too quickly, but that's another discussion for another.
I'm not counting out the Steelers. I'm counting in the Saints and counting in the Patriots, right? I mean, that really,
understood. That's
more the issue. The issue is I don't think they stink. I think it's going to be hard for them to win the next 2 weeks. I think it's going to be hard for the Ravens to go out to Carson and win next week as well, but we'll be standing by for all that. But it was kind of a weird weekend all the way around in the NFL, and this thing has gotten so tight as to say, well, if you really believe Lamar Jackson's going to be the guy leading you into January and winning games, then I don't know that reflects well upon Flacco, the O-line, the running game, or any of that, or whether it's just, look, have you seen the games? And if you've seen the games, you see it's like saying a soft toss left-hander, give me Nolan Ryan every time until you've seen Sandy Koufax pitch, right? It's so different in the way it works for a defense, what it does to the clock, what it does to the game, what it does to down and distance, that you're not awed and inspired by Lamar Jackson, like maybe the way you are about whatever that pass that Mahomes threw the other day, by the way, whatever that is. But I don't know that any of us see this vision in Lamar Jackson that looks like Tom Brady or like Drew Brees or like you name any of the Hall of Fame quarterbacks. I'm talking about somebody that's going to be here 8 or 10 years from now. He feels like Mr. Right Now, not Mr. Right in my way of thinking, unless this is going to be the new way you're going to go do things and run a college offense and not be a quick strike kind of offense in that way, because I think at some point this doesn't have a long shelf life for me. I keep going back to that. Can you beat Tampa this week? Yes. Is he your quarterback in 2021 or 22? I can't sign up for that, Luke. I really can't, and that's why he wasn't a top 5 quarterback. That's why he would have fallen into the second round had the Ravens not jumped onto the board and grabbed him.
Well, and that's where there's so much unknown here. And I said from the time that we knew he was going to start against Cincinnati after the bye, when it was clear that Flacco hadn't practiced, he wasn't going to play, he was going to get Jackson was going to get his first NFL start. I've said all along, you need to be grading him on 2 different scales. One is the scale of trying to win right now. And with Wednesday's official announcement of him being the QB1 now, he's the guy atop the depth chart now. That's just the truth. The previous 4 weeks, there was always some degree with it being greater. And then, of course, Sunday in Kansas City, there were conflicting reports whether Flacco was going to be active, whether he was healthy enough to play. Harbaugh said after the game he was medically cleared.
By the way, that's John's game, though, right? That's John loves that.
Sure.
Like waking up on Sunday morning and it's 30 degrees in Kansas City and nobody knows who's going to play quarterback. And, that plays into John, and I think it plays into whatever they're going to be doing when they fall behind 21-3 and wherever they are and how they would play that, because I think only Flacco can save them at that point, right? He's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
But going back to what I was saying, this becomes real now. There's no longer an injury element to this. When Harbaugh said on Monday that Lamar Jackson's ankle was fine, which by all accounts it is, and he said he was 100% on Wednesday, and he certainly was on the practice field, and everything seemed fine. And when he confirmed that Flacco was fully cleared to play, the preparation element wasn't going to be there because he was going to be a full participant this week, then they were going to come to a decision. With that understood now, and with Lamar Jackson being atop the depth chart, the rookie excuses only go so far. Those excuses go far in the big picture for next year and beyond. But when you're talking about Week 15 and Week 16 and Week 17, he needs to play well, because this isn't a case like Joe Flacco in 2008 where Troy Smith and Todd Bauman, I think, was their number 3 quarterback that year, where there is no one else. There is no one else that you can point to. Over the last 4 weeks, Joe Flacco was inactive. He wasn't healthy enough to play, or at least there was some semblance of a perception of that going into, say, the Kansas City game at least. But now you have a Super Bowl winning quarterback who has become the backup, and I'm on board with that. I said a couple weeks ago, I think it's time for the Ravens to embrace the weirdness, but there's still a heck of a lot of unknown here. And to your point, what does happen if you fall behind 14-3 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the third quarter on Sunday? What does happen if you're in a 2-minute situation against the Chargers and you need a touchdown, but Lamar Jackson to that point in the game is 9 of 16 for 115 yards? What do you do there? I think it's a really slippery slope, because you are talking about your quarterback of the future, at least right now and presumably next year and the year after that, let's say. But at the same time, you're trying to win games. So the pressure is ratcheted up for Lamar Jackson. I think the pressure here is ratcheted up on John Harbaugh, because this is a coach's decision now. This is no longer about health. This is about what's the best fit for this football team. And we know that there are a lot of mitigating circumstances here. We know there are a lot of variables at work here. I think in a perfect scenario, Flacco would have remained healthy. They would have continued to play the way that they were playing before and hopefully made some bye-week adjustments. And I've heard so many people throw out different qualifiers out there, different proclamations. Certainly this team is playing differently. There's no question about that. But for people that try to say, well, the Ravens wouldn't be 3-1 after the bye if Lamar Jackson wasn't out there, I don't know that. You don't know that. Anyone saying that, you're just saying that to say it. I think what's been going on over the last 3 to 4 weeks, more so than anything else, whether you're pro-Joe Flacco, anti-Lamar Jackson, pro-Lamar Jackson, anti-Flacco, or you're just not really sure about it, which, by the way, I consider myself much more in that category. I think a lot of people have been seeing what they want to see and trying to explain away why something is working or why it isn't working. And we've talked about the running game. Of course they run the ball much better with Lamar Jackson. There's no question about that. But is that to say that their offense wouldn't have gotten back on track after the bye if Flacco had been healthy? I have no idea. Would Gus Edwards and Ty Montgomery and a healthy Kenneth Dixon have given the Ravens a good enough running game with Flacco compared to Alex Collins? I don't know. We don't know that. I'm not saying it'd be as good, but could it have been good enough coupled with a better passing game, which they would have right now? I don't know. I look at the defense, and people have talked about the time of possession. and what impact that's had on the defense. The defense has given up more points per game over the last 4 weeks than they did over the first 9 weeks of the season. Now, Kansas City's in there, but New Orleans was in there early in the season. Pittsburgh for 2 games was in there early in the season. So, I hear people make these comments about how this is a markedly better football team right now. Don't get me wrong. They've won 3 out of their last 4. They're winning football games. They're finding ways to be successful. But
which is what we thought they could do in September, by the way. We thought,
sure.
We believed they were good enough.
But my point is, my argument for continuing to go with Lamar Jackson at this point is much more about the unknown with Joe Flacco's health. Yes, he's healthy enough to play, but how close to 100% is he? How mobile is he? What does that running game look like when Flacco is back in there compared to what Jackson brings in that regard? Is the passing game so much better than what it is with Jackson that it offsets what you lose in the run? For me, that's why I stick with Lamar Jackson than to say, well, their offense is so much better now because they're running for 200 yards per game, even though they're passing for much, much less, even though offensive points per game has actually been slightly down. They've gotten 3 scores from their defense and their special teams. And the one that I've heard a lot of people talk about, the time of possession, because I've heard so many people say, well, their defense is better late in games. Well, go back in the first half of the season. Other than the Saints game, can you give me another example where the defense was faltering in the fourth quarter? They stunk from the get-go in Week 2 against Cincinnati. They stunk from the get-go against Carolina. They gave up 14 or 17 points in the first half against Pittsburgh the second time around. So by no means am I saying that these aren't variables, but I was debating this with someone on Twitter earlier in the day on Wednesday. They were saying, well, I'll take an offense that scores maybe a couple points less than they were before because the defense is not giving up as many points. And, well, the numbers don't really suggest that. So I think a lot of this has had to do with just timing, and Flacco's been hurt. Of course you're going to go with Lamar Jackson. I'm not saying you play RG3 over the last 4 weeks, and I'm fine with going with what they've been doing because it's a known commodity rather than not knowing what you're going to get from Flacco, not knowing what you're going to get from the running game, not knowing how much better the passing game is going to be under those circumstances. So for me, it's just about kind of going with what's allowed you to win 3 of the last 4 games, but I don't think necessarily that they're a markedly better football team because, well, the Cincinnati Bengals have been one of the worst teams in the NFL since mid-October. Oakland's been one of the worst teams in the NFL all season. Atlanta has circled, other than a brief stretch in October, they've been a bad football team. And, okay, they played really well against Kansas City, but guess what? They lost. The Ravens have lost plenty of close games against great teams over the last 3 or 4 years. So this isn't even me saying to go back to Joe Flacco. I don't believe that. I think they should roll with Lamar Jackson. But I guess long story short, there's a lot of unknown here, and I'm not convinced that just because they've won 3 of their last 4 that they're just going to...
That they're a better team, right? Yeah. I mean,
that they're going to keep rolling into the playoffs. But, again, I'll go back to what I said. Because there is so much unknown of what Joe Flacco is right now physically, yeah, I think you go with Lamar Jackson. But I'm not buying the narrative that this style of play is some kind of revolutionary thing that they've discovered. I think it's allowing them to win football games given the circumstances that they were in, but I'm not at all convinced that the Ravens here in mid-December are suddenly a way, way, way better football team than they were a couple months ago. I think a lot of the reasons they lost 3 games in a row when they did was they were playing New Orleans, and Carolina was playing exceptionally well at that point. Now they've completely fallen apart.
By the way, their defense stunk too during that period of time. All of it.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I mean, this team had a lot of different issues, and their special teams were really mediocre the first half of the year. So, long story short, again, I'm fine with them going the route they're going. This is what I would do, but I'm just not. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid to the point that this is a dramatically better football team than it would have been had Joe Flacco never gotten hurt and they went into the bye and perhaps made some adjustments and, had an easier schedule coming out of the bye. And who knows? I'll remind everyone they were 4-5 last year at the bye week. guess what they did coming out of the bye? They won 3 in a row. So it is really funny how some of these things, even though the cast has changed in terms of the quarterback being at the top of the list, some of these things, we've seen this before. So that's where I still have some trepidation looking at these final 3 games and signing off that, the Ravens are automatically going to get the job done.
Luke Jones and I back on the grid. He is out in Owings Mills. We are getting ready for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Strategic Factory. I was out in the Strategic Factory shop last week creating your masterpiece. I was working on that all last week. Marketing, printing, promotional goods of all kinds. If you need signage, if you need stuff that makes your business roll, you need Strategic Factory. You can find them out on the web at strategicfactory.com. Also, our partners at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air. Get on up to the festival for the $5 game day menu. The bowl games are on. You can make life easier and order online as well. I'll be getting back up there next month for some basketball. We'll see you at Buffalo Wild Wings up in Bel Air. Also, LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. I'll be having Dr. Kevin Crutchfield on again next week talking about concussion and head-related injuries, as well as Dr. Craig Bennett for all things orthopedic. They are the new game plan for sports-related injuries. They're in Owings Mills. They're at Foundry Row. You've seen Cal Ripken on the billboards. Learn more about their world-class care out online. It's LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute at Foundry Row in Owings Mills. Luke is with us. Lamar Jackson is the quarterback. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but where is Joe Flacco in his career when 3, 4, 5 weeks from now, if he doesn't play anymore, if he's gone? Does he move to some sort of front of the board for available quarter? I don't know where we are in a world where people fawn over Kirk Cousins and Lord knows a couple of years ago the Brock Osweiler. I don't know where his value is, but I really do feel like he's been treated like yesterday's garbage around here in a lot of ways. And it's not just my affinity for him and the Super Bowl and all of that, because he's going to go on and be fine. He's got a lot of money in the bank. I don't think he's anywhere near done playing football. I think he still has some fire about him that we saw all summer and all fall. I'm interested to know where he lands. I think that's an interesting conversation as a, will it be Miami? All these places that want and need quarterbacks. Jacksonville gets thrown around a lot, and they're a bad team. Joe Flacco can still play this game at a pretty high level, man.
Yeah, I think it's very much situational. I don't think there's necessarily a long list of teams that are going to be lining up to sign a 34-year-old quarterback, or more interestingly for the Ravens, potentially trading. I think one thing you have to consider here, if we're assuming Joe Flacco's healthy and there is a handful of teams interested in him, and you mentioned it, what happens with Miami? What happens with Jacksonville? What happens with Eli Manning and the Giants? When you look at the skill players that they have there, would the Giants consider Joe Flacco as, hey, he's 4 or 5 years younger than Eli Manning, and you look to draft a quarterback and let Joe be your bridge guy?
Well, hey, Denver went that route with Peyton Manning, right? Not that Joe's Peyton Manning, but
sure.
If you want a veteran quarterback who's going to come in and bring that sort of thing into a place where the Blake Bortles and I was going to say Chad Pennington. I always want to call the Dolphins quarterback Chad Pennington, but they're interchangeable. They're all the same guy. They're a guy you can't win in September and October, November with. And Flacco has this mystique about his January that I'm still not sure that he will not be upright and throwing the football around in some position to attempt to extend the Ravens season at some point in January. I just don't think if they squeak this thing through and get there that they're going to go down to Houston and win the way they're playing right now. To your point, it is embracing the weirdness is a very difficult thing to do when everybody else in the industry is trying to get a quarterback back there to chuck the ball 50 times and building everything about their franchise around that. And every defense in the world has built everything they do around trying to stop that. That's the way the game is played. To your point, I don't think they have found the fountain of youth here, or they found some new system that is going to be shock and awe over the next decade. It feels more like the Chiefs and the Rams have found that system, quite frankly, right?
Right. And I think even if it does turn out to be that, we don't know that yet, especially when you look at where the run defenses that they have played over the last 4 weeks, where they rank. There's just a lot of unknown. It's not a negative. It's just there's a lot of unknown there. But getting back to Flacco, And this is where, if you're a Ravens fan and you're the Ravens, you're hopeful, is you look at the remaining 3 years of his deal, understanding that the salary cap, and the NFL put it out this week, is going to go up by at least another $10 million. You look at the cap numbers, and I just mean the base salary, because the prorations from the bonuses are, that's going to be gone for whatever team that is interested in trading for Flacco. You look at those base salaries, they're very reasonable for a middle of the road starting quarterback. If that's what you're looking for, if you feel that you have a good base, a good defense, good running game, a good receiver or two, and you feel like you have a team that you can win with, and you don't want to, either you don't have the ability to move up and draft a rookie quarterback, or you want to go with a veteran, I think there is some appeal for him. Now, on the flip side, Joe Flacco is 34 years old, and we've talked about this, and I've mentioned this in passing at a few different points over the last couple of years. Being a 6'6", kind of statuesque, not the most mobile quarterback in the world, that's typically an age where they're not aging so well, and things start to go downhill. And here's the reality, and it wasn't the case with Flacco or over his first 8 years, but is the case now. Durability is a major concern with him now. He had an ACL injury 3 years ago. He had a back injury that cost him significant preparation time last year and impacted his play in the first half of the season. And he missed a quarter of the season this year with a hip injury. So durability is absolutely a concern when it comes to Joe Flacco at this point in time. So I'm with you. I think there will be a situation out there where he will at least be viewed in a context of being a team starting quarterback on a short-term basis. And maybe it's what the Browns tried to do with Tyrod Taylor this year, where he began the year as the bridge quarterback. And, well, Baker Mayfield ended up being really, really good really, really soon for a rookie quarterback. And that kind of went by the wayside. But I could easily see that scenario for Flacco. And if you're the Ravens, you're hoping that maybe some team is willing to give you a third-round pick for Joe Flacco because of what I said, the remaining 3 years of that deal. If you just look at the salary, and that's all that's going to be relevant for whichever team that would potentially acquire him, it's really not all that bad. It's really tenable, and it's not Kirk Cousins money. So put it in that context. Would you rather pay someone like Kirk Cousins? And what big name quarterbacks are going to be out there? There'll be a couple, Flacco being one of them. Would you rather pay him in free agency and have to guarantee some money, even though there are these question marks about him? Or would you rather throw the Ravens a day 2 pick, an early day 3 pick, and basically you assume a 3-year deal that has no guarantees on it whatsoever? That doesn't sound so bad if you're one of those teams like a Jacksonville, maybe the Miami Dolphins. But keep in mind, some of these teams, they also have cap issues, so I think that's something that you have to consider. But long story short, I think there'll be a place somewhere, an opportunity somewhere for Joe Flacco. Even if he's not the slam dunk starting quarterback, I think he'd be somewhere where a team might draft a quarterback, and he would be the clear favorite to be that guy, at least for 2019. And then it'll be up to him to prove to everyone that he can still play. I mean, Flacco, way back when, at one point, bet on himself, and it worked out pretty well. And this scenario is clearly different, and he's at a different point in his career. But to your point, this is where I think if you're the Ravens, if there is a scenario where Flacco needs to play over the next 3 weeks or in the playoffs, or Lamar Jackson gets hurt, or there's a 2-minute situation, or they're down 17 points late in the third quarter, there's some motivation for Flacco to show that he can still be a guy that can play at a relatively high level. And I think there are some opportunities there potentially for the Ravens to benefit from that. But at the same time, you've drafted this quarterback in the first round, Lamar Jackson, and you've said he's going to be the guy now. I think you also need to be very careful about that. If you immediately go back to Flacco midway through the second quarter against Tampa Bay, if things get off to a rocky start, then that tells me two things. You don't have much conviction in anything you're doing, and two, that that's not exactly expressing a lot of confidence in your rookie quarterback. So I think there are.
Well, you don't have to have long-term conviction in any of this, right? Like any tidal wave wrecks your season. You know what I mean? So
sure.
The stakes are incredibly high all the way around for all the veteran players, for Harbaugh, for the organization. I don't think anybody believes they're going to win the Super Bowl, but that's not going to make you feel any better when you draw a straw and you get to go play in January and – no one's going to feel good about that if you lose the first week with either one of these quarterbacks. I think expectations will go up, especially if Pittsburgh keeps losing, right?
Sure. And, I mean, I think that's where we kind of go back to what happened on Sunday. How do you view Sunday? Is it a moral victory because of the fact that the Ravens had a chance to win that game? Can argue they should have won that game. Or is it the same old Ravens kind of mindset that, well, the defense played exceptionally well for 55 minutes, and then they came up small when they needed to come up big, and Lamar Jackson fumbles at the end of regulation.
Well, you could also make a case that if Flacco were out there, there's a chance that he would have let him down the field to kick a field goal, right? Like, he's good at that. He's really good at that. We've never seen Lamar Jackson do that. I don't know if we will. I don't know what Lamar Jackson looks like in 2 minute in that way. Probably looks the same way he does in every other minute. He's going to run right. He's going to run left. He's going to dish the ball off. And maybe he can cut your throat throwing the football. Maybe. Or maybe he can't, but...
Well, but it still goes back to what the formula is. And, I mean, Joe Flacco could have done that, or the Ravens could have lost by 3 touchdowns because their offense didn't sustain drives and they didn't run the football, and Kansas City got more possessions, and the defense tired out late in the second quarter compared to the fourth. I mean, we don't know. I mean, that's where I keep going back to this. There's so much of everyone seeing what they want to see and not just taking it for what it is. They've figured out a way to play when your starting quarterback was hurt, when that guy, when you didn't have a productive running game with him, which, by the way, is not an indictment on Joe Flacco. That's an indictment on the organization and the coaching staff, because you shouldn't need to play Lamar Jackson just to have a competent running game. That tells me that you have a really flawed roster. But that's another discussion for another day, and we'll talk about that.
Just like Harold Baines in the Hall of Fame, right? Just like the Orioles' new manager.
But I guess my point with that is, there's a lot of unknown here, and that I'm fine with going with Lamar Jackson. I think that's the right decision. I also want to compliment John Harbaugh, because I think rather than stretching this out over the course of the week and forcing your 11th-year quarterback who helped win you a Super Bowl way back when, answer questions about whether he should play, whether he will play, and forcing your rookie quarterback to answer those same exact questions, all in the name of getting some perceived edge and gamesmanship. I compliment John Harbaugh for making the announcement, putting the drama to rest. Will there be questions continuing moving forward? Absolutely. But we know that Lamar Jackson, at least right now, is their starting quarterback. Now, what circumstances could potentially change that? Well, if he gets hurt, I mean, that's one, obviously. But game situations, because of where the Ravens are in their season and trying to fight for the playoffs, we don't know that, but I compliment Harbaugh on not playing this game for another week. It was one thing to do this when you have the injury excuse that you can use, but it was clear that Flacco was healthy and fully participating in practice at this point, and Lamar Jackson's ankle is fine. I think that would have been a bad move by Harbaugh from kind of a human relations standpoint, and I think that would have rubbed veterans in the locker room the wrong way if he subjected Joe Flacco or Lamar Jackson to quarterback questions of who's going to play, who should play, why do you think you should be the starter, why is he the starter? That would have been a bad thing, and that's something that could have hurt them. I don't think it would have been catastrophic, but we've talked about this over and over. The locker room is a major factor here, and while I don't think veteran players are necessarily disagreeing with this decision, you know very well that guys like Marshall Yanda and Terrell Suggs and Sam Cook, guys that have been around here for a long time, or around here when the Ravens won a Super Bowl, they didn't. I can imagine it wouldn't have set with them very well if Harbaugh had basically forced Joe Flacco to go up there and try to play this starting quarterback kind of game if they tried to stretch it out this week. So I compliment, agree or disagree with the decision all you want. I mean, everyone has an opinion, but I think Harbaugh handled that part of it really, really well.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. We're going to talk some defense, and there are other players on the team besides Lamar Jackson and Joe Flacco, and there is a team coming in from Tampa, which we're going to talk about. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at the Model Lyric. Let's not forget that John Mellencamp is coming on February 20th, Joe Bonamassa on March 15th, the Dancing with the Stars troupe on January 10th, and Kansas, I've been talking about it for months and months and months. They moved the date. It's now March 1st. Want to let everybody know about that. Model Lyric and model-lyric.com, the way to find them. There's always magic at the Model Lyric. Also, our friends at Sporticulture, the flowers around the WNST studios, provided by our friends at Sporticulture. That's sporticulture.com. My pal Court's out on the west side, sending and shipping those flowers anywhere in the world, officially licensed NFL as well as collegiate stuff. Pizza John's, 113 Back River Neck Road. Hey, it's the holidays. Nothing better than giving a Pizza John's gift card. Santa puts that under the tree or in the basket. Trust me, people will be happy with some Pizza John's, including the cheesesteaks. Don't sleep on the ravioli as well. 50 years of doing it. By the way, Cole Roofing will be celebrating 100 years in a couple of weeks. Sponsor of our community and charity series. Bill Cole is going to join us here this week to talk all things Lamar and Joe and Brandon Hyde and all of the other cool stuff around here. We're out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships directly and digitally to your email inbox. All brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Get some inspiration for 2019 out at planetoftriumphs.com as well. Any breaking news, just like the Orioles hiring Brandon Hyde, you get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis is here on Thursday from 3 until 5. He'll get you ready for Tampa and get us ready for the weekend and Santa Claus, and a trip to California next week. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.